The cool autumn breeze rustled through the cemetery as Thomas stood alone before his mother's tomb. 2 weeks had passed since they laid her to rest, but the pain in his chest felt as fresh as the day she died. He clutched a small bouquet of white lilies, her favorite, in his trembling hands. Everyone else had gone home after the burial. His sister had flown back to Seattle with her family. His uncle had returned to his farm upstate. Thomas was the only one who kept coming back, day after day, unable to accept that his mother was truly gone. "I miss you, Mom," he whispered, his breath visible in the chilly air. "The house feels so empty without you." Thomas was 32, lived alone in a small apartment downtown, and worked as an accountant at a local firm. His mother, Linda, had been his rock, the one person who always believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. Her death from what doctors called natural causes had been unexpected. She was only 61 and had seemed perfectly healthy during their weekly Sunday dinners. He knelt down to place the flowers in the small metal vase attached to the front of the marble tomb. As he arranged the stems, his fingers brushed against the cold stone. Something felt off. There was a small crack near the bottom corner of the marble facing. A crack he hadn't noticed before. "That's weird," he muttered to himself, leaning closer to examine it. The crack wasn't large, maybe the width of a pencil, but it definitely hadn't been there during the funeral. The craftsmanship of these family tombs was supposed to be top-notch. His father had paid for this plot years ago, wanting only the best for when their time came. Thomas ran his finger along the crack, feeling the rough edge against his skin. And then he saw it. A faint blue glow coming from inside the tomb. His heart raced. Was he seeing things? He blinked hard, then looked again. The blue light was still there, pulsing slightly like a distant star. Thomas glanced around the cemetery. He was completely alone among the headstones, the only sound being distant traffic and birds calling from the oak trees that lined the property. No groundskeepers, no other mourners. Nobody to tell him he was crazy for what he was about to do. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight, then carefully aimed it through the crack. What he saw made his blood run cold. There, nestled among the flowers and mementos they had placed in his mother's casket, was a smartphone. The blue glow was its notification light, blinking steadily as if waiting for someone to check it. "What the hell?" Thomas whispered. His hands began to shake. None of this made any sense. They hadn't buried a phone with his mother. He had personally helped choose the items that would accompany her, her favorite book, a photo of the whole family, her treasured pearl necklace. But no phone. Thomas's mind raced with possibilities. Had one of the funeral home workers accidentally dropped their phone into the casket? That seemed unlikely. They were professionals and the phone would have been missed immediately. Had someone in the family secretly placed it there? Again, why would anyone do that? The crack in the marble was just wide enough that he might be able to retrieve the device. Thomas hesitated. Disturbing a grave was disrespectful, possibly illegal. But this was his mother, and something was clearly wrong. "Sorry, Mom," he whispered. "But I need to know what's going on." He took a small multi-tool from his pocket, a gift from his father years ago that he always carried, and carefully worked at widening the crack, just enough to fit his fingers through. The marble was surprisingly brittle, crumbling slightly, under pressure. That wasn't right either. This tomb was supposed to be solid, built to last generations. After a few minutes of careful work, the opening was just large enough. Thomas took a deep breath and slipped his fingers inside. The interior was cold and dry. His fingertips brushed against something metallic, then touched the smooth glass surface of the phone. He carefully pinched it between his fingers and slowly pulled it out. The phone was an older model, at least 5 years old, with a cracked screen and a worn black case. The notification light continued to pulse steadily. Thomas turned it over in his hands, looking for any identifying marks or clues about who it might belong to. There was nothing obvious, just a standard smartphone that looked like it had seen better days. Thomas pressed the power button, and the screen lit up, revealing a lock screen that required a password. The wallpaper was a simple blue background with no photo or personalization. The time displayed was correct, which meant the phone's battery had somehow remained charged for 2 weeks inside a sealed tomb. A chill ran down Thomas's spine that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. This wasn't just odd. It was impossible. He slipped the phone into his jacket pocket and quickly gathered his things. The groundskeeper would be making rounds soon, and he didn't want to explain the small hole he'd made in his mother's tomb. Tomorrow he would call the cemetery office and report the damage, claiming it must have been vandals or poor construction. They would repair it, and no one would know what he'd found. On the drive home, the phone burned like a hot coal in his pocket. Every red light, his hand itched to pull it out and examine it further, but he forced himself to wait until he was safely in his apartment. Once home, Thomas locked his door, drew the blinds, and sat at his kitchen table. He placed the mysterious phone in front of him and stared at it for a long moment. The notification light continued its steady rhythm, taunting him with secrets just beyond his reach. Who did this phone belong to? How did it end up in his mother's tomb? And most importantly, why was it still active? Thomas tried several obvious passwords. His mother's birthday, her anniversary, the last 4 digits of her social security number. Nothing worked. The phone remained locked, its secrets secure behind the password protection. As he set the phone down in frustration, a notification appeared on the screen. A new text message had arrived. Thomas couldn't see the content or the sender, just the alert that a message was waiting to be read. His hand hovered over the phone, trembling slightly. This was impossible. The phone had been sealed in a tomb for 2 weeks. There was no signal inside all that marble and concrete. Yet here it was, receiving messages as if nothing was amiss. Thomas picked up his own phone and called his sister Kelly. "Hey, what's up?" she answered, the sounds of her busy household in the background. "Did you—" Thomas paused, unsure how to phrase such a bizarre question. "Did you put a phone in Mom's casket before they sealed it?" The line went quiet for a moment. "What? No. Why would I do that?" "I don't know, I just thought maybe—" "Thomas, are you okay? I know this has been really hard on you." He sighed. "Yeah, I'm fine, just trying to make sense of some things." After hanging up, Thomas stared at the mysterious phone again. He didn't want to tell Kelly what he'd found. Not yet, not until he understood what was happening. She would think he was losing his mind with grief. Maybe he was. Maybe there was no phone and this was all some elaborate hallucination brought on by stress and sorrow. But the device sitting on his table looked real enough. The notification light continued to blink. Whatever secrets this phone held, Thomas was determined to uncover them. He needed to know how it ended up in his mother's tomb and why it was still receiving messages. As night fell outside his apartment windows, Thomas brewed a strong pot of coffee. He had a feeling it would be a very long night. Something told him that whatever he discovered on this phone would change everything he thought he knew about his mother's life, and perhaps her death. He opened his laptop and began researching ways to bypass a smartphone's password protection. His mother's peaceful face floated in his memory, but now questions swirled around that image. Who was Linda Hayes really? And what secrets had she taken to her grave? Or rather, what secrets had she tried to take to her grave, only to have them refuse to stay buried? 3 days passed, and Thomas barely left his apartment. The mysterious phone sat on his kitchen table, its battery somehow still holding charge. Every few hours, the blue notification light would blink, signaling another message had arrived. Each time, Thomas would try another password combination, and each time, he failed. Sleep eluded him. Dark circles formed under his eyes as he spent nights staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with questions. During the day, he called in sick to work, claiming a bad flu. His boss was understanding. Everyone knew he was still grieving his mother. On the morning of the 4th day, Thomas sat at his table with a cup of coffee, staring at the phone. He'd tried every password he could think of. His mother's birthday, her anniversary, his birthday, her childhood address, even the names of pets they'd had over the years. "Come on, Mom," he whispered, picking up the device. "Give me a hint." As he turned the phone over in his hands, a thought struck him. His mother had always been terrible with technology. She used the same password for everything, despite Thomas warning her about security risks. It wasn't anything obvious like her birthday. That would be too easy to guess. Instead, she used her mother's birthday, Thomas's grandmother who had passed away when he was just a child. With shaking hands, Thomas typed in the date, 05231942. The phone unlocked. His heart pounded as the home screen appeared. It was a basic layout with few apps, just the standard phone, messaging, and camera icons. There were no social media apps, no games, nothing personal at all. This didn't look like his mother's phone. Hers had been filled with photos, social media apps, and games she liked to play. Thomas tapped on the messaging app, and his blood ran cold. There were dozens of text messages, all from the same unknown number. He scrolled to the beginning of the conversation, dating back 2 months before his mother's death. The first message read, "I know what you did. Payment due or everyone finds out." Thomas's hands trembled as he scrolled through the messages. Each one was more threatening than the last. Second warning, payment by Friday or I go public. The flash drive has everything. Think about your family. $50,000, cash only. Instructions to follow. The messages continued, becoming increasingly hostile as his mother apparently tried to negotiate or push back. "You think you're smart? I have copies. Your son would be so disappointed in you." Thomas felt sick. What could his mother possibly have done that would warrant blackmail? She was Linda Hayes, a retired elementary school teacher who volunteered at the local library. She baked cookies for her neighbors and remembered everyone's birthdays. She was the most ordinary, kind-hearted person he knew. He continued scrolling through the messages, looking for any clue about what the blackmailer was holding over her. The texts were careful, never explicitly stating what dirt they had, just vague references to what you did and the evidence. Then Thomas reached the final message, and his heart nearly stopped. It was dated the day after his mother died, time-stamped at 3:47 a.m. "You think dying gets you out of this? I'm just getting started." Thomas dropped the phone as if it had burned him. How was this possible? How did the blackmailer know his mother had died so quickly? And more importantly, how had they sent a message to a phone that was sealed inside a tomb? Unless the blackmailer was connected to the funeral home. That would explain how the phone got into the casket in the first place. Thomas paced his small apartment, trying to make sense of it all. His mother had been blackmailed. She had died suddenly of natural causes. And now someone was still sending threatening messages to a phone they had somehow slipped into her casket. He needed to know what his mother had supposedly done. What secret was worth $50,000 to keep hidden? Thomas returned to the phone and checked the other apps. The photo gallery was empty. The call log showed only outgoing calls to the same unknown number, brief calls none longer than a minute. The browser history had been cleared. He tried calling the unknown number from his own phone, but it went straight to voicemail with no personalized message. Just the automated voice saying, "The person you are trying to reach is unavailable." Thomas needed help, but who could he trust? The police? What would he tell them? That he found a phone in his mother's tomb that was receiving threatening messages from beyond the grave? They'd think he was crazy. His sister Kelly? She was practical and level-headed, but she had a young family to worry about. If there was danger involved, he couldn't risk pulling her into it. There was only one person he could think of, his mother's oldest friend, Diane. She and his mother had known each other since college. If anyone knew about a secret in his mother's past, it would be Diane. Thomas grabbed his keys and the mysterious phone and headed for his car. Diane lived across town in a small house with a beautiful garden that his mother had always admired. He hadn't called ahead. This wasn't a conversation he wanted to have over the phone. As he drove, another message notification appeared on the phone. Thomas pulled over to read it. "I see you found my little gift. Like mother. Like son. You're next? A cold sweat broke out across Thomas's forehead. The blackmailer knew he had the phone. They were watching him somehow. He glanced around frantically, searching for anyone suspicious on the street, but saw only normal afternoon traffic. With shaking hands, he put the car back in drive and continued to Diane's house, constantly checking his rearview mirror. When he arrived, Diane's car wasn't in the driveway. Thomas parked anyway and walked to the front door, ringing the bell several times. No answer. He peered through the front window but saw no signs of life inside. Frustrated, he walked around to the back of the house where Diane kept a hidden key, under a flower pot, a habit his mother had always scolded her for. The key was still there. Thomas hesitated only briefly before unlocking the back door. Under normal circumstances, he would never enter someone's home without permission, but these were not normal circumstances. "Diane?" he called out as he stepped inside. The house was quiet and smelled faintly of cinnamon, Diane's signature scent, from the potpourri she made herself. Thomas moved through the kitchen into the living room. Everything looked normal until he reached Diane's small home office. The desk drawers were pulled out, papers scattered across the floor. Someone had searched the place and they hadn't been careful about it. His heart racing, Thomas pulled out his phone to call the police, when he noticed a small notebook on the floor, half hidden under the desk. He picked it up and saw his mother's handwriting on the open page. Bank of Westfield, box 7113. A safety deposit box. His mother had a safety deposit box at a bank across town, one he'd never known about. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made Thomas jump. He peered through the blinds and saw Diane getting out of her sedan, grocery bags in her arms. He quickly put the notebook in his pocket and went to the front door, opening it just as Diane was fishing for her keys. She screamed, dropping her groceries. "Thomas, you scared the life out of me," she exclaimed, hand over her heart. "I'm sorry, Diane." He stopped, noticing the bruise on her cheek, poorly concealed with makeup. "What happened to your face?" Diane touched her cheek self-consciously. "Oh, this? Just clumsy old me walked right into a cabinet door." She bent down to gather her scattered groceries. "What are you doing here, honey? Is everything okay?" Thomas helped her pick up the fallen items. "No, everything is not okay. I need to talk to you about Mom." Diane's hands froze for a brief moment before continuing to collect a bag of oranges. "Let's go inside. These groceries won't put themselves away." In the kitchen, Thomas waited impatiently as Diane methodically unpacked her bags, placing each item in its designated spot. When she finally turned to face him, her usual warm smile was gone, replaced by a wary expression he'd never seen before. "What about your mother, Thomas?" He pulled out the mysterious phone and placed it on the counter between them. "Someone was blackmailing her, and I think you know why." Diane stared at the phone, her face draining of color. "Where did you get that?" "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Diane sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly looking every one of her 65 years. "Your mother had secrets, Thomas, ones she never wanted you to know." "What secrets? What could she possibly have done that was worth paying $50,000 to keep quiet?" Diane's eyes widened. "50,000? Oh, Linda, what did you get yourself into? Tell me, Diane. Please." She looked up at him, tears forming in her eyes. "It wasn't what she did, Thomas. It was what she saw." Thomas stared at Diane, his mind racing. "What do you mean, what she saw? What did my mother see?" Diane got up slowly, checking that her curtains were drawn before sitting back down. Her hands trembled as she reached for Thomas's. "Your mother and I were more than just friends who met. For coffee and book club," she said quietly. "We worked together." "You both taught at Westridge Elementary," Thomas said, confused. Diane shook her head. "No, honey. After she retired from teaching, we worked for Richard Caldwell." The name hit Thomas like a punch to the gut. Richard Caldwell was one of the wealthiest men in town, a real estate developer who'd transformed the city's skyline over the past decade. His face was on billboards, local TV commercials, and campaign posters. He'd been running for mayor when Thomas was in high school. "You worked for Caldwell Properties?" Thomas asked, still not understanding. "Not exactly." Diane took a deep breath. "We cleaned his house, his private residence, twice a week for the past 6 years." Thomas blinked, trying to process this. His mother had never mentioned working as a housekeeper. She'd told him her retirement was comfortable, that her pension and savings were enough. Had she been lying all this time? "Why wouldn't she tell me that?" he asked. "Pride, maybe," Diane said. "Or maybe she just didn't want you to worry about money. But that's not important now." She leaned forward. "About 8 months ago, your mother was cleaning Caldwell's home office when she accidentally knocked over some files. As she was picking them up, she saw something she shouldn't have." "What?" Diane's voice dropped to a whisper. "Financial records. Proof that Caldwell was laundering money through his construction projects. Millions of dollars from foreign investors that were never actually used for the buildings." Thomas felt dizzy. "Are you saying my mom was blackmailing Richard Caldwell?" "No." Diane looked horrified. "Your mother would never. She was honest to a fault, too honest." She glanced nervously at her windows again. She went to the police, showed them what she'd found. And nothing happened. The detective she spoke to said they'd look into it. Weeks passed. Then one day that detective showed up at her house with a warning. Said she should forget what she saw, that going against a man like Caldwell would only end badly for her. Thomas's mind flashed to the threatening texts. But someone was blackmailing her. Diane nodded. "After the police brushed her off, your mother did something I begged her not to do. She made copies of the documents she'd found and threatened to take them to the FBI if Caldwell didn't turn himself in." "She blackmailed him?" Thomas couldn't believe it. His mother, the woman who returned extra change when cashiers made mistakes, had tried to blackmail one of the most powerful men in the city. She wasn't after money, Diane insisted. She just wanted justice. But once she made that threat, things got complicated. Caldwell's security chief, a man named Vincent, started following her. Following me too. Then the messages started coming. Thomas pulled out the mysterious phone. "On this?" "No, that's not her regular phone. I've never seen that one before." Thomas unlocked it and showed her the threatening texts. Diane's face paled as she read them. "These aren't from Caldwell or his people," she said. "These are from someone else. Someone who knew what your mother was doing and decided to profit from it. A third party? How would they even know about any of this?" Diane looked away. I think it might have been the detective, the one who warned her to back off. He knew everything, and cops don't make much money." Thomas felt sick. A corrupt businessman, a dirty cop, and his mother caught in the middle, and now she was dead. "Diane," he said slowly, "do you think they killed her? The medical examiner said it was heart failure, but..." Tears welled in Diane's eyes. "I don't know. Linda had heart problems she kept private. But the timing..." She couldn't finish the sentence. Thomas remembered the notebook. "What about this bank box, box 7113 at Bank of Westfield?" Diane wiped her eyes. "That's where she kept the evidence. She told me about it, said if anything happened to her, I should get whatever was in that box to someone trustworthy." "Why didn't you?" "Because the day after she died, someone broke in here and tore the place apart. They were looking for something. I was terrified, Thomas. I didn't know what to do." Thomas stood up. "I know what to do. We're going to that bank." Diane looked terrified. "It's not safe. These people already killed your mother." "We don't know that for sure," Thomas interrupted, though in his heart, he was beginning to believe it. "But I'm not going to let them get away with whatever they did. Are you coming with me or not?" 20 minutes later, they sat in Thomas's car outside the Bank of Westfield. The imposing stone building had stood downtown since the 1920s. "You'll need the key," Diane said. "Safety deposit boxes have 2 keys. One the bank keeps, one the customer keeps." Thomas's heart sank. "I don't have it. It wasn't with her personal effects." "Check the phone," Diane suggested. "The case, I mean." Thomas pulled out the mysterious phone and examined the worn black case. It seemed ordinary, but when he ran his fingers along the inside, he felt something hard. He pried at the edge of the case until it separated slightly from the phone, revealing a small key hidden in a secret compartment. She was always clever, Diane said with a sad smile. Inside the bank, a manager led them to the vault after Thomas provided his ID and his mother's death certificate, which he'd been carrying in his briefcase along with other important documents he'd needed for funeral arrangements. "I'll need a moment with the box," Thomas told the manager once they were in the private viewing room. As soon as they were alone, Thomas unlocked the box with trembling hands. Inside was a USB drive, a manila envelope, and a handwritten letter addressed to him. He opened the letter first. "My dearest Thomas," it began, "if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I hope you never have to see these words. But I need to be prepared." Thomas read on, his mother's familiar handwriting bringing tears to his eyes. She explained everything, finding the documents, going to the police, being warned off, and then being approached by Detective Robert Walsh, who offered to help her for a price. "I refused," she wrote. "I would never pay for justice." But Walsh wouldn't take no for an answer. He said if I wouldn't pay him, he'd tell Caldwell I had evidence. He gave me a burner phone. If you're reading this, you've probably found it, and told me to keep it with me at all times. The messages started soon after. Thomas glanced at Diane, who was keeping watch at the door. He continued reading. "I don't know who will win this terrible game, but I know I can't keep playing it. My heart isn't strong enough for this stress. The doctor says if I don't calm down, I might not have much time left. So I've made a decision. The USB drive contains everything. The original files I found, recordings of my conversations with Walsh, and videos I secretly took when Caldwell and his associates were discussing their plans. The envelope contains account numbers, dates, and names. Take it all to Agent Philip Chen at the FBI field office in the city. Not the local police, only the FBI. I trust you, son. I love you more than anything in this world." The letter was signed simply, "Mom." Thomas folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket along with the USB drive and envelope. As he did, the mysterious phone buzzed with a new message. "I know where you are. Leave the bank now if you want to live." Thomas showed the message to Diane. Her face went white. "They're watching us," she whispered. "We need to go." Thomas hesitated. "If we run now, we'll always be running. What choice do we have?" "We go to the FBI, just like she wanted." As they stepped out of the bank, Thomas scanned the street for anyone suspicious. A black SUV was parked across the street, its windows tinted. A man in a suit stood near the entrance, pretending to check his watch. "That's him," Diane whispered. "That's Vincent, Caldwell's security chief." Thomas took a deep breath. "Get in the car. Don't look at him." They walked casually to Thomas's sedan. Just as they reached it, another text came through on the mysterious phone. "Last chance." Thomas opened the car door for Diane, then walked around to the driver's side. As he did, he noticed a small black object stuck under the wheel well. His blood ran cold. It was a tracking device. They were being followed and probably had been since he found the phone. That's how they knew he was at the bank. "Change of plans," he said quietly to Diane as he got in. "We're not going straight to the FBI." "Where are we going?" Thomas started the car, watching Vincent in his rearview mirror. "First, we're going to lose our tail. Then we're going to finish what my mother started." As they pulled away from the curb, Thomas made a silent promise to his mother. He would get justice for her, no matter the cost. The truth about her death and her life would not stay buried. Thomas took 3 quick right turns, watching the black SUV follow at a distance through each one. He wasn't an action movie hero, just an accountant who'd never even gotten a speeding ticket, but he knew the basics of checking for a tail. "They're definitely following us," he told Diane, who was clutching the door handle with white knuckles. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice shaking. Thomas thought quickly. "We need to ditch the tracker and switch vehicles." He pulled into the parking garage of the Westfield Mall, a massive 3-story structure always packed with shoppers. "We can't abandon your car," Diane protested. "We're not abandoning it. We're just going to borrow something else temporarily." Thomas found a spot on the 2nd level, away from security cameras. Stay here. Lock the doors. I'll be right back. Before Diane could argue, Thomas slipped out and crouched by the wheel well, quickly finding and removing the small magnetic tracker. He walked briskly toward the mall entrance, then veered suddenly toward a service corridor he knew led to the loading docks. He'd worked at the mall during college, unloading trucks for the department store. The loading area was busy with delivery vehicles coming and going. Thomas spotted what he was looking for, a florist's van with the keys still in the ignition while the driver unloaded arrangements from the back. He felt sick at what he was about to do, but reminded himself that his mother's killers were right behind them. Thomas casually walked to the van, climbed in, and drove away before anyone noticed. He circled back to the mall's second level where Diane was waiting anxiously in his car. "Get in," he called through the open window. Diane hurried over, eyes wide at the stolen vehicle. "Thomas, we can't, just for a few hours," he promised. "I'll leave it somewhere safe with the keys inside. Right now we need to get this evidence to someone who can help us." As they drove away from the mall, Thomas placed the tracker under a passing delivery truck, hopefully sending Vincent on a wild goose chase. "Who can we trust?" Diane asked. "Your mother's letter said FBI, but how do we know they're not corrupt too?" Thomas had been thinking about this. "My old roommate from college, Pete, works for the newspaper. He's an investigative reporter, always talking about exposing corruption and standing up for the little guy. He'd know how to handle this safely." 20 minutes later, they pulled into a quiet neighborhood and parked in front of a small blue house. Pete's ancient Volvo sat in the driveway, covered in bumper stickers from various political causes. "Wait here," Thomas told Diane. "Keep the doors locked." Pete answered his door in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, looking like he'd just woken up despite it being mid-afternoon. His shaggy hair and 3-day stubble completed the disheveled reporter look. "Thomas." Pete squinted in surprise. "Man, I'm sorry about your mom. I meant to come to the funeral, but I was on a deadline and—" "It's okay." Thomas cut him off. "I need your help. It's about my mom. She was killed." Pete's sleepy expression vanished. "Killed? I thought it was heart failure. That's what they want everyone to think." 10 minutes later, Pete, Thomas, and Diane sat around Pete's cluttered dining table, with the contents of the safety deposit box spread out before them. Pete had skimmed through the documents, his journalist instincts clearly fired up. "This is huge," he said, examining the USB drive's contents on his laptop. "Caldwell's been laundering money for years. These offshore accounts, the shell companies, and these recordings your mom made, they're damning." Thomas leaned forward. "So you believe us? That they killed her to keep her quiet?" Pete nodded grimly. "I've been investigating Caldwell for a feature piece. Nothing this concrete, but rumors. About bribes, threats to competitors. The man's a monster in a tailored suit." He looked up from the screen. "But if he killed your mother, we need more than financial crimes to bring him down." "What about the detective?" Diane asked. "Walsh. He was blackmailing her too." Pete was already typing on his laptop. "Robert Walsh. Been with the department 15 years. Decorated twice for bravery." He clicked through more pages. "But there have been complaints, excessive force, missing evidence. Nothing that stuck." "He gave my mother that phone," Thomas said, placing the mysterious device on the table. "And somehow someone's still sending messages to it." Pete picked up the phone carefully, examining it. "It's a burner. Prepaid, no contract. Impossible to trace." He scrolled through the messages. "These latest ones, though, they're not from Walsh." "How do you know?" Thomas asked. The writing style changed. Earlier messages are threatening but professional. These newer ones are more personal, emotional. Pete pointed to the most recent text. "This isn't a cop or a professional criminal. This is someone who's angry, someone who's making it personal." A chill ran down Thomas's spine. "Caldwell himself?" Pete shook his head. "Not his style. He'd have others do his dirty work." "Then who?" The phone buzzed with a new message, making them all jump. Pete read it aloud. The phone was meant to stay with her, a reminder of her betrayal. "You've taken that from me too." "Too personal," Pete murmured. "This is someone who knew your mother well." Before Thomas could respond, headlights swept across the living room window. Pete peered through the blinds. "Black SUV," he whispered. "Two men getting out." Thomas's heart pounded. "Vincent, they found us." "Back door," Pete said, grabbing his laptop and the USB drive. "My car's parked behind the garage." They slipped out just as heavy knocking started at the front door. Pete led them through a neighbor's yard to where his Volvo was hidden from street view. "We need to get to my editor," Pete said as they piled in. "Jack has federal contacts. He'll know who at the FBI we can trust." As Pete drove, Thomas's mind raced. Someone close to his mother was sending those messages, someone who felt personally betrayed by her. The list of people who knew her well enough to feel that way was very short. "The funeral home," Thomas said suddenly, remembering something. "The last text my mother received was the morning after she died. You think dying gets you out of this? How would anyone know she was dead so quickly? It wasn't in the paper yet." Diane gasped. "Stephen, the funeral director, he and your mother dated briefly last year." Thomas turned to stare at her. "What? Mom was dating someone?" "Just a few months. She broke it off. Said he was too controlling, wanted to know everything about her life." Diane's eyes widened with realization. "And he would have had access to her after she passed?" The pieces clicked together in Thomas's mind. He put the phone in her casket. But why? "Rage," Pete suggested, steering them through back streets to avoid main roads. If she broke up with him, then he found out she was involved in something dangerous and illegal, something she never shared with him. He might have felt doubly betrayed. But working with Caldwell and Walsh? Thomas couldn't wrap his mind around it. Maybe not working with them, Pete said. Maybe just taking advantage of the situation. If he knew about the blackmail, maybe he decided to get his own piece of the action. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. The evidence for my money. Final offer." He doesn't know we already have the evidence, Thomas realized. He thinks it's still hidden somewhere, and I'm the only one who can find it. "We can use that," Pete said, pulling into the parking garage beneath the newspaper's downtown office building. "Set up a meeting, wear a wire, get him to confess." Thomas shook his head. "Too dangerous. This guy helped prepare my mother's body. He had access to her personal effects. He knows things about her, about us, that make him unpredictable. We need to go to the FBI, Diane insisted, just like Linda wanted. Pete parked in a dark corner of the garage. "My editor first, then FBI, I promise." They rode the elevator to the 12th floor in tense silence. The newspaper office was quiet, with just a few reporters working late. Pete led them through the maze of desks to a glass-walled office at the back. Jack Chen, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses, looked up from his computer as they entered. His expression changed from annoyance to interest as Pete quickly explained the situation. "Let me see the evidence," Jack said, holding out his hand. Pete passed over the USB drive and the documents. Jack reviewed them silently, his frown deepening with each page. "We've suspected Caldwell for years but could never prove anything," he finally said. "Your mother was very brave. Can you help us get this to the right people?" Thomas asked. "People who won't bury it?" Jack nodded, picking up his phone. "I know someone at the federal building, a straight shooter. We can trust her." As Jack dialed, Thomas's borrowed phone buzzed one more time. "I'm closer than you think." A chill ran down his spine as he looked around the office. Through the glass walls, he could see a man stepping off the elevator, wearing a funeral home suit. Stephen had found them. "He's here," Thomas whispered, pointing through the glass wall at Stephen making his way across the newsroom floor. Jack Chen immediately grasped the situation. "My office has a back door," he said, pointing to a second entrance behind his desk. "Fire stairs. Go down to the 9th floor. The law firm there has security guards. I'll stall him." "The evidence," Pete reminded them, nodding at the USB drive, "and documents still on Jack's desk." Jack quickly handed everything back to Thomas. "Take it. I've seen enough to know it's legitimate. My FBI contact is Agent Liu. She'll meet you at the courthouse in 30 minutes. He scribbled a name and number on a business card and pressed it into Thomas's hand. Thomas, Diane, and Pete slipped out the back door just as Stephen knocked on the office's glass front door. Through the glass, Thomas caught a glimpse of the funeral director's face. The same sympathetic expression he'd worn at his mother's service now twisted with something darker. They hurried down the fire stairs, the harsh emergency lighting casting strange shadows as they descended. Thomas's mind raced. How had Stephen found them so quickly? The mysterious phone buzzed in his pocket again. Of course, the phone itself was being tracked. "Wait," Thomas whispered, stopping at a landing. He pulled out the phone and examined it carefully. "He's following this. We need to get rid of it." "Not yet," Pete said. "Those messages are evidence." He took the phone, removed the battery, and tucked the disabled device into his laptop bag. That should block any tracking signal. They continued down to the 9th floor. As Jack had promised, a security desk stood outside the law firm's glass doors. 2 uniformed guards looked up as they burst through the fire exit. "We need help," Thomas said breathlessly. "Someone's following us." The older guard stood up, hand moving to the radio on his belt. "Sir, calm down. Who's following you?" Before Thomas could explain, the fire door opened again. Stephen stepped out, his funeral suit immaculate, his face composed in a professional mask. The transformation from the glimpse Thomas had caught upstairs was jarring. Now he looked completely normal, even trustworthy. "Thomas, thank goodness I found you," Stephen said smoothly. "I've been so worried." The guards looked between them, confused. "This man is dangerous," Thomas told the guards. "He's been threatening my family." Stephen shook his head sadly. "He's confused. Grief does terrible things to people." He turned to the guards with a practiced, sympathetic expression. "I'm Stephen Powell, director at Eternal Peace Funeral Home. I handled his mother's arrangements recently. He's been struggling with her passing." The younger guard's posture relaxed slightly. "You know this man, sir?" He put a phone in my mother's. "Casket," Thomas said, desperation creeping into his voice. "He's been sending threatening messages." Stephen's face registered perfect confusion. "A phone? Thomas, what are you talking about?" Diane stepped forward. "He's lying. We have proof that he and others were involved in blackmailing Linda Hayes before her death." The older guard held up his hands. "Hold on, everyone. This sounds like a police matter." "Exactly," Stephen agreed. "Why don't we all go downstairs and sort this out properly? I'm sure Thomas just needs some help." Thomas saw the trap closing. If they went with Stephen, they'd never make it to the police. And if the guards called local law enforcement, there was no guarantee they wouldn't reach Detective Walsh or someone else in Caldwell's pocket. Pete stepped forward, press credentials in hand. "I'm Peter Morris, investigative reporter with the Tribune. These people are helping me with a major corruption story involving Richard Caldwell. We have an appointment with federal agents." He nodded toward the elevators. "If you could just escort us downstairs and into a cab, we'll be out of your hair." The mention of Caldwell's name changed the atmosphere. The older guard straightened. "Caldwell Properties manages this building," he said quietly. "But my brother lost his construction business when Caldwell's company underbid him with impossible numbers." He made a decision. "Frank, escort these 3 to the parking garage through the private elevator. I'll handle this, gentlemen." Stephen's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing raw anger beneath. "You're making a serious mistake," he said, his voice dropping to a threatening tone. The guard's hand moved to his weapon. "Sir, I need you to take a seat while we sort this out." Minutes later, Thomas, Diane, and Pete were in a taxi heading toward the courthouse. Thomas kept checking behind them, expecting to see the black SUV appear at any moment. "We're almost there," Pete reassured him. "Jack's contact is one of the good ones. Once the FBI has the evidence, you'll be safe." Thomas wasn't convinced. Stephen was ready for us. He knew exactly what to say to those guards. If the older one hadn't had a personal grudge against Caldwell. "That's how these people operate," Diane said bitterly. "They look respectable, trustworthy. Your mother trusted Stephen too at first." The courthouse came into view, its stone columns illuminated against the night sky. As they approached, Thomas noticed a woman in a dark suit standing by the entrance, scanning the street with alert eyes. "That's probably Agent Liu," Pete said as the taxi pulled over. They approached cautiously. The woman spotted them and straightened. "Peter, Morris?" she asked, her gaze moving between the three of them. Pete nodded. "Jack Chen sent us. This is Thomas Hayes and Diane Reynolds." Agent Liu's expression remained neutral. "Jack said you have evidence regarding Richard Caldwell and potentially a police detective named Robert Walsh." Thomas clutched his bag tighter. "And Stephen Powell from Eternal Peace Funeral Home." Liu raised an eyebrow. "The funeral director? That's a new one. Let's talk inside." The courthouse was nearly empty at this hour, their footsteps echoing in the marble hallway as Agent Liu led them to a small conference room. Two other agents waited inside, laptops open. "These are Agents Cooper and Bell." Liu introduced them. "Now, let's see what you've got." For the next hour, Thomas and Diane explained everything while the agents examined the evidence. Pete occasionally filled in details from his own investigation into Caldwell. The agents' expressions gave little away, but Thomas could tell they were taking it seriously. "The recordings your mother made are particularly valuable," Liu finally said. "She was smart to document everything." "Will it be enough?" Thomas asked. "To bring them all down?" Agent Cooper nodded. "Financial crimes leave paper trails. Between these documents and the recordings, we have enough to get warrants for Caldwell's accounts and properties." "What about my mother?" Thomas pressed. "Can you prove they killed her?" The agents exchanged glances. "That's more complicated," Liu admitted. "We'll need to exhume her body, run toxicology tests. If someone hastened her death, we'll find out." "And Stephen?" Diane asked. "The messages he sent. Harassment, stalking, tampering with human remains, those are serious charges," Agent Bell said. "Once we bring him in, we can check his devices against the messages on that phone." Agent Liu stood up. "For now, we need to get you both to a safe location. Caldwell and his people will realize soon that we have this evidence. You'll need protection until we can make arrests." As they prepared to leave, Thomas felt a strange mixture of relief and grief wash over him. His mother's secrets were finally out in the open. Justice might actually be possible, but nothing would bring her back. "She'd be proud of you," Diane said softly, as if reading his thoughts. 3 weeks later, Thomas stood in the cemetery, watching, as workers repaired the marble facing on his mother's tomb. The exhumation had been completed days ago, the tests run, her body returned to its resting place. The small crack that had started everything was now being sealed properly. So much had changed. Richard Caldwell had been arrested at his office, the FBI walking him out in handcuffs past stunned employees and eager news cameras. Detective Walsh had tried to run but was caught at the Canadian border. And Stephen, whose obsession with Linda had twisted into something dangerous after her rejection, had confessed to placing the phone in her casket as his own form of sick punishment, a way to keep her connected to the troubles that had plagued her final months. The toxicology reports had confirmed what Thomas had suspected. His mother's heart medication had been tampered with. The dosage increased to dangerous levels, not enough to appear as anything but natural causes to a medical examiner not looking for foul play, but enough to stress an already weakened heart past its breaking point. Caldwell had ordered it, Walsh had arranged it, and Stephen, thinking he was just leaving a symbolic message for a woman who had rejected him, had unwittingly become the link that exposed it all. Thomas placed fresh lilies in the vase by the tomb. Pete's newspaper had run a front-page story on the corruption scheme and Linda Hayes, the retired teacher whose courage and principles had brought down a powerful criminal network. Her name had been cleared, her bravery recognized. "We got them, Mom," Thomas whispered to the marble stone. "All of them." As he turned to leave, his phone rang. It was Agent Liu with an update. The judge had denied bail for all 3 men. The EI prosecutor was confident they had airtight cases. Justice was working as it should. Thomas thanked her and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The mystery that had begun with a strange blue glow from his mother's tomb had changed his life forever. He had discovered a side of his mother he never knew, her courage, her principles, her determination to do what was right, no matter the cost. Walking back to his car, Thomas felt her presence beside him, stronger than any phone or message could capture. The truth had been horrifying, but facing it had brought a kind of peace. His mother's legacy wasn't secrets or tragedy. It was the simple, powerful choice to stand up for what was right. And Thomas would make sure the world remembered that